From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief digital strategist at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I have my good friend, Mr. Tim Nash, with me with his segment Security with Tim Nash. And we are going to talk about how to secure your WordPress website in these uncertain times. This is one episode if you're a user, a developer, a designer, or anybody else involved with WordPress websites you don't want to miss. Grab a drink, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Hey, everybody. Stunning Digital Marketing is your digital concierge. We help you put the pieces together to make your marketing success. Specialties we have including WordPress design and development, WordPress security, which is one of our most popular offerings, ads, and more. So if you want to succeed in the digital world, go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and have a look at what we offer, and we'd be glad to help you. And let's jump on a call and make it happening. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey. Hey, everybody, Rob Cairns here. And today I've got my good friend, Mr. Tim Nash, with me talking all about security. How are you this month, Tim?
I'm doing well. It feels like it's been a very, very, very long month.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're in the security space, it's almost like 5 months in one kind of. And and we are just about to go into Black Friday very quickly. So that will add to it even more. So the I don't want to use today to kind of drudge up what's happened in the last month. There's been so much written about it, talked about it, said about it, including on this podcast. So I'll be very transparent. But what I wanted to do was talk about what we need to do to help some people. So let's talk security in uncertain times because we are there. Where do you sit with all this?
I mean, we should have probably done the pre-show rules of how much can I swear?
You can swear lots. It's my show.
I mean,
So
I wrote an email to my clients, and it needed several iterations because the first version was what a clusterfuck, and we
yes.
went back from there into more palatable language. Yeah, it is what it is. But boy, is it a mess, and a mess that I can't see being resolved the way people want it to be resolved for a very long time. Maybe down the line, but in the short term, we are in, as you say, uncertain times. And that's not good for security. We like it when things are nice and steady and reliable. Then we can get on with doing other things. When things are uncertain, you end up into this firefighting mode where what's the next problem? And clients become really uncertain and they start doing silly things and clicking on silly links. So we're there. I've already started seeing the spear phishing attempts.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think we've been there for a couple of weeks now, to be fair. I don't think we just got there. I think clients are concerned. Some are, some aren't. I've spent way too much time in emails saying, we've got your back. Don't worry about your site. I was sharing with you before we went to record, I've got sites on WP Engine. So that's fair. I've also got a number of sites, over 60, running events custom fields, and that's fair. The other thing I'm seeing out there is more and more vulnerabilities are coming out too. I looked at the iThemes list before we went to record this. There was 312 vulnerabilities this week in that mess. So just to add to this clusterfuck, we've got more there. I haven't gone through the list in detail, so I don't know how many are devs saying, forget about it, I don't need this mess, or walking away from plugins versus devs saying, I need a strategy. where do we go from here with the site owner? Like, I think our site owners are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now.
I mean, everybody is stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think that's the problem. So, while we're not going to delve into the whole thing, I think it's worth just emphasizing a couple of points that are
Yeah.
important. And one of which is that until maybe this week, but certainly in the last month, everybody sort of assumed the WordPress project included WordPress.org and the repository. And WordPress is entirely focused around that. If you go and grep WordPress.org into the WordPress code base, it's there a lot because WordPress makes lots of calls to the WordPress.org repository. So when you're suddenly in a scenario where that's been cut off, and we can take that scenario for somebody like WP Engine where they've been forcibly cut off by Mass and Automatic, but it could be another scenario. Let's say bad actors take down WordPress.org, or there's some legal reason that you can't access WP.org in your jurisdiction. Then your WordPress instance can't automatically update, which for somebody like me, that's like, well, I push people towards automatic updates because they are safe and secure. But if they're not happening, they are neither safe nor secure. But worse, you won't know about the updates. So you're in just the same bad boat if you're manually updating. People who wake up one day and they can't access WordPress.org do not know if there are updates available. I mean, so they fundamentally sit there and go, what do I do? Now, you could get a list of the plugins you've got, go to either WordPress.org via some other mechanism that works, or go to one of the plugin mirrors like on GitHub and go and download and check each plugin to see if it's been updated and manually do that, visiting each plugin developer's website. But we both know how that's not going to happen.
That's correct.
So what's really going to happen is if a site gets cut off from WordPress.org for any reason, the site will not update. There are means to make it work, especially if it is sat in sort of like being driven by a development team or by a good support team. They might have it, for example, be using something like Composer and it being pulled from their Git repository, so they might not notice it as much. But for the average user, they're going to come into an interface and it's going to say there are no updates, and they're going to go, there are no updates. Worse, there is nothing to tell them that there is anything wrong. So where you were saying that you've been getting emails from clients, the scary scenario is when clients, let's say this happens again, but with a new host. We're going to call them bad host. Bad host gets blocked, but bad host is actually a rubbish host. They're a terrible host, and they don't put in new things to protect their customers. To the credit of WP Engine, for whatever side you sit on, they managed to stand up a full plugins repo and core update mechanism in a weekend and a little bit. That's pretty impressive. That in terms of their customers and how little issue they're worth for their customers, that's pretty good. But let's say bad host doesn't do that. Bad host just goes, oh, I had enough. We'll just ignore it. Now, all of bad host customers have no real way of knowing that they've been affected. So when we're sort of planning for the future, one of the things we have to plan for is, how do we know we're not getting updates? How do we know things are not working? Because a lot of people don't have that very basic. Before we get to how can I get to multiple pipelines, how do I get to custom repos, how do I do any of that? Fundamentally, the biggest worrying thing is that if you're cut off, you do not know. You are in silence land, and many clients will just carry on regardless.
And as we record this and as this comes out, we're headed into Christmas shopping season, just to talk about that. And not only we headed into the Christmas shopping center, we're headed into the season of WordPress 6.7. Release candidate one dropped this morning. So not only do we have the uncertain times about all these updates, we got the issues running into Christmas time, and we got the issues doing with the latest update. And the question is, and my question still is, should we trust the code in that update with all the shenanigans that have gone on in the last while?
I mean, the one thing we do have, so when we're talking about transparency and about governance, which is what this ultimately boils down to, we do not have transparency in governance. I think
We do
that's
not.
a fair statement. I don't think anybody's going to argue with me and that certainly could be improved. But we do have transparency in code, sort of. In that we know what is being published to the repos and we can build from them. So
Yeah.
you can go to GitHub and get a copy of WordPress, and we can see what has been committed to that copy. That's a very public copy, and that is a direct mirror of the version on Subversion. And as far as I know, that has always been the case, that there has never been any deviation. So that's meant as a sort of mechanism where you can trust the Subversion, which isn't controlled by the WordPress project. Subversion is sitting on WordPress.org, which we've discovered is somehow legally not part of the WordPress project, which seems a bit weird, but yeah, we'll go with it. But these do match. So we do have some sort of transparency over that code. What you don't have is transparency over the tarball. So when you actually do the update, the zip file that comes to the server, when you unpack it, we can do something where we can verify the checksums. There's one fundamental problem in this chain. The checksums we're checking against are hosted on the place that we got the tarball from. And so if they're wrong, if somebody has hypothetically, and I don't think this would ever be the case, but we'll go down this sort of hypothetical line and then we'll talk about more practical stuff. But if hypothetically the tarball was somehow manipulated and the checksums were manipulated at the server end, then you could have bad malicious code put in. Or you could certainly have code that makes things break that looks perfectly innocent. It's more likely that will be picked up in the whole chain. And I really think that somebody to manipulate it at the end of the sequence, while possible, is very unlikely in the scenarios we're in now, but a very good example of where a bad actor could do this.
Yeah.
Where you could have if a bad actor can break into the pipeline and change the code that's at the point where the tarball is being generated and where the checksums are being done, then that can be distributed without anybody really noticing. Now, if you've got a paranoid putting tinfoil around your head, this is a good example of where you might go, oh, okay, when 6.7 comes out, I'm going to pull from GitHub, which is somewhere we can see commits. Now, it's not perfect because all the work gets done on Subversion, which is, again, separated and then pushed across. Those commits aren't signed. So can't guarantee that Bob put that commit in. But we can see that somebody called Bob has more or less has committed something, and we can see everything that's come in. So we have a bit more transparency that way. So I'm not worried too much about 6.7 having bad code in it. Obviously, shenanigans may occur, and I don't want to sort of like suggest things, but I can come up with many wild scenarios for how you could break, say, ACF in a core release or make things a bit more awkward. I don't think anything like that's going to happen. I think people will be safe to upgrade to 6.7, but I've always had this thing where it's like major releases near holidays is horrible. As someone who doesn't get to go on holiday because of major releases near holidays.
I agree. I agree. It used to be worse in the days when we got them in the first week of December. Remember those days?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, yeah, even worse is when they were in the first week of December, but then they slipped.
Yep.
So they were in the second week or third week of December, and you're like, well, got to go on. Christmas is coming. Going. The office is empty.
Yep. I agree. It's yeah. I think the other thing we're starting to see, and I think I've seen some of it already, there have some devs who have actually pulled their plugins from the repository. And what they have done is they've said, please go to our website and update once manually. And then the update points back to their repository, because the only way that you can update from WordPress.org is that you can, sorry, the only way you can host a plugin or a theme on WordPress.org is that the update goes to WordPress.org.
Mhm.
And I think what we need to do, and I was saying this earlier, and I've been thinking and talking a lot about this, is I look at the Linux world. If I want to download Linux Mint tomorrow, I have the choice of going to any repository that's mirrored, including some in Canada at universities, some across the world, to get that program. I think in the WordPress world, we need to go to mirrored repository. And I think that would actually help enterprise groups, not hurt it, because enterprises don't like one point of failure.
Oh yes. Sorry. The reason I'm suddenly I'm clicking in the background is I'm opening up a document that I wrote in September, which was going to be a blog post, and I never published it for many reasons. And it's called Democratizing Updates.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's a 5,000 word document on how to create a distributed multi-channel repositories based on the Linux system. I'm very much in favor of this sort of scenario where you can, and I've seen some examples where people have built UIs and built ideas around this. But very simply, I think inside WordPress core, there should be an option for you to subscribe to channels. Absolutely, the WordPress.org one should be like this. Yeah, I don't mind if it's worded, this is the official one. I don't really care on that, but it's like, this is the primary channel. But I want the ability to be able to say, okay, but I want to subscribe to Packages channel, or I want to be able to subscribe to WP Engines channel.
Or the one in London, England, which is closer to you,
Yeah,
even more
exactly.
so.
Somewhere that's nearby. But I also want the ability to disable channels, to be able to say, I'm going to disable the WordPress.org one. I'm going to disable all these channels, but I'm going to enable Tim's special magical security service channel,
Yeah.
where the only plugins that appear in that channel are approved plugins that have been code reviewed by myself. That would be fantastic for my clients. So I could just say, here is a list of approved things. I'm hosting the mirror. And so I'm host the mirror with just the channels with just the plugins that I want my clients to be able to have access to. And then how I decide when they get updated, that's down to me. You then subscribe to that channel owner, and that channel owner takes over that position of trust.
Yeah.
Now, when we have that distributed system and that channel owner takes over the trust, we do end up in a scenario where bad actor could take over a channel. But because it's distributed, in many ways, this is easier because we can then say, warning, that channel is bad. Disable that channel, go to a new channel. There's a lot of people can then start building out new and innovative things. Do you want to have custom, does Freemius want a channel? So that now if you're a Freemius plugin owner, you don't need to put in their library that is 28 gigabytes or however big it is of junk that's in every single one plugin that uses Freemius, because it has to send an entire e-commerce solution in with it. You
Yeah.
could just have the Freemius channel, and people can buy plugins through the Freemius marketplace, and they just appear on the channel. This is a really well-trodden path. We can then start doing things like, okay, We want to make sure that the checksums are distributed.
Yeah.
Well, now we can distribute them out. So we can have a mechanism where the plugin owners say, these are the checksums. I am publishing them on my GitHub, on my website. As long as we come up with a standardized mechanism, then the mirrors can take those checksums, they can use them, but they can also pass them on to the clients.
Yeah.
So you can end up in a scenario where, like, okay, I want to use WP Engine's channel for ACF, or I'm going to use WordPress.org's channel for ACF, but I'm going to use WP Engine's checksums to make sure that the WP.org channel is actually publishing what is meant to be on there.
Yeah.
Again,
That
this is
makes sense.
really well-trodden path. There are technical problems to do this, but it's not that much. We could probably build in this into the WordPress core infrastructure as it is now through a plugin. Little bit hacky with a plugin, but you could certainly do this with a plugin. And if we could do it with a plugin, it wouldn't take much to then take that and go, let's put this into WordPress core if there's a will.
Yeah, that is the key. Now, the other thing that happened in all this mess, as we call it, and I'm being very gentle at this point, you know that, is Oliver Sid from PatchStack came out very publicly and said PatchStack is not going to announce any vulnerabilities publicly at this point in time. Interesting enough, iThemes, as I said, is still announcing them because the list had 302 or 303 today that came out. Where do you sit on that? I personally think Oliver's taken the high road as saying this is unprecedented at times. Let's help the community and let's deal with it. What do you think?
I mean, I think PatchStack have now resumed doing that. I think it was just while WP Engine were completely blocked out.
Yeah.
I think the second that was over, they started publishing again. I mean, I thought it was a very pragmatic step. It weighed the balance between, okay, we've got a large percentage that cannot at the moment update in a reasonable way. If we start publishing things that they can't update to, that will cause a problem. I thought his messaging was really good, and I fully expected to see WordFence and the others go on board. Obviously, I didn't expect Automatic to. I think I made a sarcastic comment about give it a week and Automatic will publish a vulnerability in ACF.
You did.
I think it
Yeah.
was 6 days. So they
Yeah.
they undercut me slightly. I really hate it when vulnerabilities are weaponized, when security is weaponized and made into things. Because our entire industry is built on trust.
Yeah.
And when people are publishing vulnerabilities that are so trivial and often not vulnerabilities, it lessens the real ones, because the problem with our current setup is we rely on CVSS scores. And these scores are designed for archaic software running on Windows machines inside corporate networks.
Yes.
So every single score seems ridiculously scary. You know, this is an 8.99 or a 9.9. It's like, yes, but most of that score is because it's network, because it's on a website. So it's automatically going to be jumping all the way up here. So we can easily scare people by accident or on purpose when there's absolutely no need to. And I think that this is sort of not holding back with those vulnerability reports, just gave everybody that little bit of breathing space and let people not panic. Longer term, though, we now have some really interesting problems. Like going back to checksumming earlier, try checksumming ACF. We're doing a verified checksum. Whose checksum are you using? How are you using it? What version is it? If you've got SCF and ACF and they now both get joint vulnerability reports, but they're on totally different version numbers, the whole thing is a mess as doing incident response and doing vulnerability management, where you're getting a vulnerability report in and you're going, this is tit for tat is pointless. These are really low and meaningless, but something's going to come along and it's not going to be meaningless and it's going to be ignored because it's in this tit for tat going on. Yeah, frustrating as hell.
Yeah, and that is using nice language, I think, at this
Yeah,
point.
I'm being very polite. I don't want either side to send nasty lawyers to me.
Yes. And the problem is people like you and I aren't getting much sleep these days, which is another problem which we won't even.
No, I mean a really good example is obviously, where everybody knows that WP Engine had their access to WordPress.org cut off. This was done at like, I think it was 5 p.m. in the Pacific
Yeah.
on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Can't help think that timing was a little bit done to make WP Engine staff work over the weekend. But it didn't just affect WP Engine staff because, of course, there was me at 3 in the morning in my time building proxy servers for my clients so that my clients on WP Engine could get the updates that they needed that day. And I was really proud. We managed to get a proxy server set up and running for them in about 3 hours from start to finish. And we're getting those updates from WordPress.org back on WP Engine clients that I was working with. And as I say, WP Engine managed to build up a whole stack over a weekend. So credit to them. But the next weekend, there was like the ACF stuff going on. And last weekend, I genuinely left a message in a Slack group that I belong to that said, I'm going to write an email to my clients and say, turn your servers off from 9 p.m. on GMT on Saturday, and we'll deal with it, whatever shit has happened by the Monday morning. And I genuinely turned off social media. I had my email on. I didn't quite get to the point where I could turn off my phone because I do have clients who rely on me. But I did sort of like, right, we're not going to play this. We're in a good place. It should be fine. And longer term, I'm really pleased that I'm getting a lot more inquiries for things like, hey, talk to us about immutable WordPress and
Mhm.
setting up immutable stacks. So this is good. This is a positive thing that's coming out of this. That I'm getting a lot more people who are interested in that side of things, that really more deep technical but very secure setups that we use.
Yeah. Um, as we move forward with all this going on, if you're a client and you've got a website, you got a bit of an IT department, and a lot of from my experience of being in healthcare for 22 years, a lot of IT departments don't know how to manage web servers. I hate to say it. I'll say that again. You're shaking your head, so you agree with me. Where do you go if you got that big critical WordPress site to make sure you don't let the bad actors in with all the stuff going on? Besides hiring somebody like you or me.
I mean, obviously you hire us. That's clearly the
Yes.
answer. No, I mean, the thing is that well, the managed hosting companies are spooked.
Mhm.
That is to a certain extent, that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, because right now they are the most reactive they have ever been, all of them. Whether that, I mean, JP Engine is probably at the moment one of the most reliable hosts you're going to get
Yeah.
because they are firefighting like mad. Um, and now that they've stood up their servers, now they've got those bits in place, actually, they're probably in a better state than most other managed hosts to deal with this sort of disaster recovery. But any of the major managed hosts are probably in a good place to be. Obviously, there are some hosts that are going to be better than others. There are some hosts that are owned by different people who sit on different sides of fences, and you may or may not have moral and legal ideas why you would want to go with one versus the other. Um, but I'm still advocating that if you don't have the internal skills, go down that managed WordPress hosting route, making sure you look for these hosts that are very much containerized, cloud-based hosting solutions. Don't go for something that's cheap and nasty. Don't go for a shared host. You just you do managed WordPress hosting makes this difficult, but you do tend to still get a little bit of what you pay for. If you're paying $199, it ain't going to be good. There's no, it can't be. The literally laws of physics dictating how many bits can be sent around on a chip means that it can't be that good. So you want to be paying a reasonable amount of money, not masses, but remembering for most companies how much they pay for a physical store. Now you're getting even more traffic through your virtual store for 1/10, 1/100th of the price. It's worth spending 50, 60 pounds or dollars a month on hosting
Yeah,
minimum sort of
I
level
agree.
of, if you've got a business and your business relies on your hosting, that's the level you probably want to be at. And you can then get a half decent managed host at that price.
No, I agree.
Even better, if you can find somebody who will do your hosting and support alongside you, that's not a bad place to be. Going and finding these people are you having someone to hold your hand through this, who's going to be up at 3 in the morning building your proxy server. It's a good place to be. You want those people if possible.
It has been, I would agree with you. And don't, we've been telling people this for years. You have, I have. Don't go buy those 199, 299 plans. They're not going to get you anywhere at the end of the day. They might get you cheaply on the web, but beyond that, they're not going to do anything. And they're certainly not going to provide you support for 199 a month. So don't
No,
do
I
that.
mean, I genuinely still recommend that the biggest thing that I say to people when they're saying, "How do I pick a host?" I have like a triangle diagram I show them, which is, has this idea of where you can do it on price, you can do it on performance, and you can do it on scalability, but you can't have all three unless you're willing to spend a humongous amount of money. So pick two of these things. And support is on that tri. So yeah, one of those was support. And for support, I just say ring them and ask to speak to the pre-sales team. If you can't ring a person and ask the pre-sales team, pretty sure you're going to be in a scenario where you're not going to be able to get to the support team, because there's nothing that a hosting company likes more than to sell to you. And if their sales team can't get to you, if you can't get the sales team on the phone, you're probably not going to get the support team on the phone either.
That's true.
Which is a nice rule of. I know we live in a world where I personally hate phoning people, but this is one of the times that I'd actively do it. Say, look, if you can get the sales team on the phone, then there's a reasonable chance you might be able to find a support team member on the phone. But if you can't get the sales team on the phone, that's probably not hosts that you want to be hosting with necessarily. There are always exceptions, but that's one of my little tips.
Yeah. So we talked about hosting. We obviously, even more so now, got to make sure your backups are running and working. Like that's assumed, but even more so now. What else would you do? Would you run a software firewall in your WordPress install, or is that a waste of time with all this going on?
Sorry, I managed to cough at just the wrong moment. What was the
It's
question?
it's okay. Would you run a software firewall within your install? Something like Solid Security, something like PatchStack App, Solid's based on PatchStack App, let's be phase, something like WordFence. Would you bother running that at this time, or is that just a waste of overhead?
So, I am always very careful to say no one should ever uninstall their security plugin if they're happy with it.
Okay.
I do not routinely recommend installing a software-based firewall. They have a massive advantage in that they are contextually aware. By that I mean they know what plugins you've got installed, and therefore they can deeply embed those rules inside the setup. However, they have a massive performance overhead, and honestly, most of them do not do any contextual awareness. They just download the rules for everything and just bung it through. There are some scenarios where I would recommend something like PatchStack. Over in those are the scenarios where they are a fire and forget on a cheaper, where you do have that client who refuses the maintenance package, who is on the cheaper hosting, who you've set them up, you know they're going to get hacked, but you're shoving on something in the hope. If you are maintaining a regular updates cadence, by the time they've written the rules to protect you, you've already patched with the plugin should be patched. It's very rare we end up in a scenario where we have a 0 day and that the patch comes out from the security vendors comes out before the patch from the plugin developers come out. So as long as you're on a good either automatic updates or on a good cadence for your updates, normally the benefits of these firewall solutions is limited, and the performance side is often a big overhead.
Yeah.
Also, you end up at all of these. If you're going down that route, you have to pay for them. There is no point getting rules 14 days later.
I agree.
Yeah, so if you are going down this route, it's you're buying a puppy. You have to keep feeding it. So you have to pay them monthly. If you don't pay the monthly fee, you might as well not have it on. It's just a waste of space. But having done that, I'm going to caveat that with the plugin might have extra features. It might have user monitoring. It might do these other bits. I wouldn't worry too much about things like malware scanning. I'd rather have a dedicated malware scanner for this. And I wouldn't be doing WordPress is a PHP application, and you do not want PHP to be doing long-running processes in the web browser. It is just going to be bad.
Not good. Yeah.
So if you're going to do this, try and get it server-side, and good hosts will be doing all of this for you. And weirdly, actually, the shittier, cheaper the host, the better their WAF is. Because the cheaper the host, the more they're stacking onto their servers, they care about CPU cycles a lot more than your larger hosts who have given you a container, because they don't care. They've given you a container. You use your container resources, it's not affecting everybody else. If you're on shared hosting, running a multi-instance Apache, and you start spawning Apache instances and spinning up and causing their CPUs to spike, they care. Consequently, they'll be running some sort of WAF, software WAF inside that Apache setup. And because of that, they'll have a bunch of mod security rules, and it will be really tightly controlled. So the cheaper the host, the better the WAF normally. But I'd still shove WordFence onto that, or PatchStack, or does Solid actually produce their own firewall rules?
No, they Solid Security uses PatchStack's. They have a relationship
They use
with them.
PatchStacks, yeah. So I mean, if I was going to choose between them, I would probably go down PatchStack. As that is just my. If someone asked for a recommendation, I begrudgingly say, yeah, if you're going to go down this route, then PatchStack's the route to go down. So but I'd only be doing that on sites where I did not believe I would have any. I wouldn't be managing them. The client won't manage them, and the chances of an update happening on them is limited. In that scenario, I also sneakily go in, turn automatic updates on everything, and add a little MU plugin that will enable automatic updates by default instead of on by default instead of off.
Yeah.
And that's my little gift to them on my way out of, look, I've done the best for you I can. You're on your own now. But if they're a managed customer, I tend not to recommend it. There are better solutions and better ways of dealing with it.
Yeah. And on managed hosts, let's be fair, a lot of hosting companies, especially with core updates, especially core version updates, so 6.6.1, for example, they don't push those updates out right away. They control those updates very closely on the managed host.
Yeah, I mean, most managed hosts will be doing at least some basic level of testing before they push them out to their clients, even if that is as simple as spinning up their own single staging site, or they might, in fact, quite a lot of them, if they're part of the hosting teams, the WordPress hosting team have a plan where they basically give out a benchmarking system and get hosts to run their benchmarks, which actually works as quite a neat little thing for the hosts, because they get to see, hey, is this all going to work well or not? And so at minimum, the big managed hosts certainly are doing that at the minimum ahead of time. Right now, I think every major managed host will have somebody who is currently running and testing the beta. And when it goes into production, they'll have a barrage of testing that they'll do before they push it through. On minor releases, which are like security releases and the really minor ones, they probably will just do as minimal amount of testing and just pass them through onto the clients as soon as possible. But major releases, it's not uncommon to see 2 week plus delays across the board.
At least, yeah. Is there anything else you would suggest a site owner does at this time beyond all the usual stuff they should be doing any other time of the year?
So we talked about backups. I'd
We did.
really, this is the time. If you're not regularly testing your backup, this is the time to go and just take a peek at your backups, because you're going to be wanting to be thinking about, especially coming into, if you're an e-commerce owner, you are not going to want to roll back multiple days of your database. There is nothing worse than you have the best Black Friday sale possible and something goes wrong over that weekend and you do not have a backup that covers Black Friday.
Oh, yeah.
So you are now stuck looking at your PayPal or Stripe screen, looking at figures and going, there is no associated data with this. So we're going to play guess the product to try and recreate.
So let me share with you one unrelated to this, but I'm going to. And the former client's not going to like me. He had a website on my server, which he did not pay a bill for. And as per his contract, the website was brought down when he refused to pay the bill. It says right in his contract. There's only one little problem. He has outstanding e-commerce orders in Woo, and he can't figure out in direct relationship to his Stripe account who ordered what and where. And this is my real life as I'm living it right now.
Lovely.
Yes.
But I mean, this is a common thing. It doesn't matter whether it's your host turning you off or you're getting Rob turning you off, or if it's an accident or a bad actor and you've been hacked. All of these end up in the same scenario with you staring at a screen going, how can we recreate it? And sometimes the answer is you can't. And you are going to have to refund the customer. But then you get the even more fun because when you hit because you can't refund them through your own website. So you're in your bank, whatever merchant account, and you hit refund, and that fires a webhook back to WooCommerce who goes, what? I don't know what to do. And if you're really unlucky, it goes, oh, I've got a new order ID because the incremental IDs have kicked in. And you inadvertently refund. WooCommerce then marks somebody else's order as refunded. And this is a fun scenario. Let's not go there. Try not. The way to avoid this is making sure we have really good backups. Make sure we're actually testing our backups. And I think every time I've come on your show, I've come on and gone, take good backups, test your backups. And every time I feel like there must be a portion of your audience going, I take backups, I test backups. It's like, yeah, but you don't really, do you? You're telling yourself you take backups, and you're telling me you've tested the backup, but in your heart, you know you haven't actually tested the backup.
Yeah,
you really haven't.
Yeah, what I'll tell you is the last 3 weekends in the middle of this clusterfuck, I have sat around and
You like that word now, don't you?
Oh, I use that word. I've used worse in the last 3 weeks, Tim. I have actually pulled sections of 50 backups and done restores to test domains to make sure my backups are good. I have not played around at all. And what Tim and I are saying is, we do this stuff. A lot of people always look at people like us and say, oh, you recommend it, but you don't do it. I know you well enough to know that if you suggest to somebody to do it, you're doing it yourself. And that's the same way I work. If I suggest to somebody to do something, that's the way I work. So test your backups. Plugins.
I have a blog post that's, I think it's called, Does Your Host Have Ransomware? I'll send you the link and you can pop it in the show notes if you like.
I would.
And it goes through a list of how quickly can you restore your website if your host disappears. And it goes through the steps you'll need to take and the process that I do as well. And it basically gives you a challenge the challenge is, can you beat my time on how quickly I could restore a site, moving hosts entirely without access to the old host? You want it realistically, you should be able to take your site and take the last backup, which should be within the last 24 hours. And I think you should be able to go and get a new site up, including changing of the DNS systems, in about 2 hours max.
I agree with you.
I think most people couldn't do it in 2 weeks.
I can
And
do
they're
it.
going to hit the first snag, which is my DNS is with the company I host with.
Which is something you should never do.
So we were talking about other steps. Now is this time for these little things where you're like, okay, it's not just WordPress we need to think about. My hosting, do I need to think about that? Do I really need all my eggs in one basket? Maybe I should think about when it comes to domain renewal time, or before, maybe I should transfer my domain to a dedicated domain renewals partner that I trust and want to use.
And while we're talking about domains, don't save the $20 and get one of these free domains, because it's worth mentioning while we're on this wonderful topic that a free domain the host owns, you do not own. So you cannot transfer that domain anywhere. It is not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, at the best of times, you lease domains. Another good example is and I don't want to put people off getting interesting TLD, so that's the bit at the end, the .coms. But if you're currently a .io user, you probably are starting to panic a little bit.
Yes.
Because there is literally well, that country is not going to exist officially. And so those domains, at the moment, as it stands by the various bylaws of ICANN and bits, have to be sunsetted within 2 years. So that will be interesting. And now I got a sneaky feeling there's going to be some changing to make that not happen. I think that they'll just fudge it. But in theory, all .io domains will cease to exist in about 2 years' time, which is awkward because there's quite a lot of people who use .io.
Yep. The other thing is, and let's kind of go to plugins. I was going to go to before we got into a whole domain discussion. If you've got plugins running on a mission critical site, there's anything this should have taught you in the last 3 weeks is you should be using the paid version and stop being a cheapskate. Because if you're running paid version of ACF, if you're running paid versions of other plugins, all this, I can't connect to WordPress.org becomes a mute point, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I have two sort of issues that I think I tend to buy the paid version of something, even if I'm not going to use it,
To support them.
because I'm supporting the plugin development, which means I'm supporting its existence going forward, which is going to give me vulnerability updates, which means I'm going to be more secure. So I'm helping the whole process through, even if I ultimately don't need to use the features. I think that's also, this is if someone has got a paid version available, then they are clearly wanting to make their livelihood out of this. Now, not everybody in open source wants to do that. Some people give away and support their plugins because that's what they absolutely love doing. And I 100% support them. I'm not saying that every plugin should have a paid version. But if they do have a paid version, to me, that's them saying, hey, if you want this to continue, here's how you help me. So I feel it's really important people support plugin vendors that way. But also, as you say, that plugin is going to be distributed by them. Now, there are pros and cons to that. If a bad actor does gain access to their distribution mechanism, you are in an awkward position. And in theory, somewhere like WordPress.org should have better security. We have seen plenty of poison well attacks on WordPress.org where a developer account has been compromised and bad stuff's happened. So it's by no means more secure than necessarily than the developer's own site. But the developer is more likely to know you're going to get to updates more timely. And right now, we are in a world where a lot of our trust has been broken.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter who you are or what you think about the situation. There are us and them and us, and camps have formed. And some people, we are reaching the stage where someone says, the sky is green. And you're going, no, it's pretty black right now, but normally it's blue. No, the sky is green. And so we're at that stage where things are so polarized and so different that the one place that you can trust a plugin is the actual developer.
Yeah.
So if Elliot says, this is I am running this plugin and this is my plugin and I'm getting it from here, I think generally you should go to them. If they have a paid version, even better, you're supporting them. And that's the plugins that have moved away from the repo. Again, I would follow them. I worry about this, about them setting up and putting their own update mechanisms in. I really wished we had the infrastructure changes we were talking about earlier.
Yep,
in place first. That would have been ideal because then they could do what they wanted, and we could just. I'd love to have an ACF channel pop, and then an ACF Pro channel where I just got a key, and that went into and that channel was now active for me. Even better because then I could have the two channels, and if I did stop paying for ACF Pro, then it just downgraded me to ACF, and I got the free version. You could do so many cool things, and we could have a much nicer world, but we're not there. But at least if you're following the developers, they're writing your code. Their code is running on your site. If you do, you have now. Before we used to have to say, WordPress.org was a safe source of trust. It's up to you whether you still think that. But either way, you now get the option to have developers being a safe source of trust. Otherwise, you are the source of trust, and that means that you have to manage all this infrastructure and setup, which isn't a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with you saying, actually, our Git repo is the source of truth, and it's only come from our Git repo, and we will merge things in on we'll manually merge things in. That's not a bad solution if you have the support and manpower to do so, and the dev time to do so. I mean, you can automate a lot of that, but it is there was a comment that was made. It might have been from Matt, and he was talking about how everybody's had a free ride and their free lunch was over, or words to that effect. I can't remember the quote exactly. And in a way, he's sort of right in that we have been complacent about what we have available and how we're going to get it, and consequently, a lot of people are running on somebody else's infrastructure and somebody else's coattails. And I think, if nothing else, maybe not now, maybe not in the next 3 months while we go over the Christmas period, but into the new year, I think you're going to see a lot of mid-sized organizations going, we don't want to move from WordPress. WordPress is a fantastic solution for us, but we need to take ownership and we need to take more control over what we do with it and how we manage it. And so I think there's going to be a very noticeable drop in the number of plugins being downloaded from WordPress.org as people come up with mirrors, come up with mechanisms, or just bring things into their own infrastructure and manage their own updates that way.
I agree with you, which again brings another set of rules, another set of complexity, and another set of issues. As we kind of wrap this up, Tim, a couple quick things that people can do, or have we basically covered the gambit?
I think we've done the I'm going to just drill backups into people. There's other things you can do, but I think if we drill in the backups as a primary bit, don't. I mean, actually, no. A thing to do is to not care too much about the drama.
Yeah.
There are important things we have to do, especially if you manage multiple sites. You do have to pay some attention, but the drama can make everything feel heightened and require like we must do things right now because everything is, and you can take time to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that if you're getting any email saying with any sense of urgency attached to it, you must do this now. I laughed because there was a change to um, WordPress's Slack,
Yeah.
and Slack sent out an email telling me how I had to log back in because of a single sign-on thing. And the reason I was laughing is like this reads like a spear phishing email.
It did actually. And I should tell you, I don't have that problem because you know where I sit on WordPress Slack, don't you?
Well, there you go. And a lot, and I mean, I imagine that Slack community has reduced significantly in the number of people because they haven't. I think it said something like you have 5 days to log in, and otherwise your account gets deactivated. It's just like this just reads really badly. But if you're getting things like that aren't from Slack, if you're getting any communication that seems to be coming from WordPress
Mhm.
or from your host, but it doesn't feel like it's really from your host,
Yeah.
just we've all developed these like tingly senses, and we're nearly all on a heightened state anyway because we're coming into Black Friday, and the amount of phishing goes through the roof. But
Yeah.
just be ultra careful because there are direct phishing campaigns, and there are campaigns which are getting fairly smart. The Finally, after God knows how many years, fishers have learnt to use, well, presumably ChatGPT to proofread their emails. So the
Unfortunately,
general
yes.
standard of quality of the English in the emails has gone up in the last few months,
Way up.
which is terrifying because that was like the easy. You could open up a phishing email and go, yeah, but all of this is misspelt and like now the quality is ratcheting up, and maybe that's actually a whole topic for another time.
Yeah,
Just
we should.
talking about how phishing and spear phishing has developed around WordPress in the last few months because I've seen some amazing examples and ones that I would fall for, I think,
Me too.
which is quite terrifying.
I caught one recently where I had to go back and look at it 3 times. And I saw one outside of WordPress, interestingly enough, and I'll share this, and I actually shared this on my personal blog. There was even a phishing email that took the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and put it in a fake email summons in the email, and all the verbiage was right. There's only one problem. The RCMP doesn't send out court summons by email, but all the verbiage was right. I actually have a good friend who works for the RCP. I walked it into it, and he's like, his response was wholly, I'll use the word crap. Those weren't the words he used. Where did this come from? And I said, a friend sent it to me. Would you deal with it, please? That's how good they're getting. They are
Mhm.
not, they are not the misspelled messes of 10 years ago. That's out the window for most of them now, to be honest. So
We had a very similar one in the UK that came from Her Majesty's courts and tribunals, which was basically a jury summons.
yes,
But if you wanted to get out of your jury summons, you could basically fill in the form and pay a small fee to get out of your jury summons.
thank you very
I
much.
imagine a lot of people fell for it
I'm sure.
because it looked so legit.
Yeah.
And it's only that, common sense would go, hang on a minute. I feel I would know if I could just pay my way out of jury summons.
Yeah.
And would the value be quite so low?
Yeah. So true. Thanks again for this, Tim. I hope you and I have shed some light on this for some people because I know right now, as I said, I didn't want to drudge in the past drama. I want to help our community. That's why we did this show this way today to try and help some people and quell some of the concern out there because there's a lot of it, rightfully so. If somebody wants to hire you, how's the best way these days?
You can come visit me on timnash.co.uk. I don't really hang out on Twitter very much. I'll be honest, the drama has dragged me back in a little bit. But you can find me on most platforms as either T Nash or Tim Nash Co UK. And yeah, LinkedIn, my website. And if you, I don't know when we're going to be putting this out, but there's a small chance that if it comes out early, if you're around on the 31st of October in London, I will be at WordPress London doing spooky Halloween stories
Awesome.
for WordPress London Security Night.
I so love that. And also get on Tim's newsletter list. He does send one out. And he also writes some really good, great blog posts. In the last couple of weeks, I was saying to him before we went to record, and on LinkedIn, your blog posts are right on the money. So go read what Tim has to say because he's out there to help you guys. So appreciate that so much. Have a wonderful day, Tim. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thank you very much for listening to the STM Show. The STM Show is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, your digital concierge. For all your digital marketing needs, especially WordPress security, jump on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and let's help you put the pieces together and make your business succeed in the marketing realm. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Very special thank you to Tim Nash for joining me on this edition of the STM Show. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I love you. I miss you very much. And thanks for all the inspiration over the years and your caring, your understanding, and helping me grow as an individual. Thank you, Dad.